Only 42% of U.S. restaurants were profitable in 2024. Not 42% fail, 42% succeed, and the ones that failed weren't empty. Some of them were packed. In May 2024, Red Lobster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. At the time of filing, the chain still had hundreds of locations and tens of thousands of customers walking through its doors every week. People loved Red Lobster. Dining rooms were filling up on weekends. The biscuits were still warm. It died anyway. It's not alone. TGI Fridays filed for bankruptcy in 2024 and lost roughly half its U.S. locations within a year. Hooters filed Chapter 11 in 2025. Boston Market has lost 95% of its locations since 2022. Denny's, Wendy's, Buca di Beppo, all closing at scale. These are household names running the same math every independent restaurant runs. The math that quietly decides whether a busy dining room becomes a sustainable business or just buys time before the doors close. So why does this happen to packed restaurants? And what's the math owners face every single day just to keep the lights on? You've heard the claim 100 times. 60% of restaurants fail in their first year, 90% within 5 years. It gets repeated everywhere. Almost none of it is true. The most rigorous study was published in 2005 in the Cornell Hotel and Restaurant Administration Quarterly by H.G. Parsa and his team. They tracked more than 2,400 restaurants in Columbus, Ohio over 3 years using local health department data. 26% of independent restaurants failed in their first year, not 60, not 90, 26. Another 19% closed in year 2, 14% in year 3. Add those together and you get about 60% over 3 years. That's the source of the myth. The 3-year cumulative rate got compressed into a 1-year claim. The honest picture, roughly 20 to 30% of restaurants close in their first year. About half were gone within 5 years. Around a third make it to 10. Brutal numbers, but very different from 60% fail in year 1. This matters because the math gets worse the longer you survive, not better. Year 1 is just the beginning. Once a restaurant opens, every dollar of revenue has somewhere to go. The benchmarks in 2026, according to the National Restaurant Association's State of the Industry report, food cost runs 28 to 35% of revenue, average 32.4%. Labor runs 25 to 35%, with the full-service median at 36.5%. Rent runs 5 to 10%. The combined food plus labor figure has its own name. It's called prime cost. Prime cost is the single most watched number in restaurant accounting. Above 65%, you're almost certainly losing money. Below 55%, you're exceptional. Most restaurants live in between, and where you land in that band often decides whether the business survives the year. After everything, the net profit margin for a full-service restaurant runs 3 to 5%. Fast casual runs 4 to 10. Quick service can reach 5 to 12. Best case numbers for healthy operators. Here's the part that matters. Only 42% of U.S. restaurants were profitable in 2024. 58%, nearly 6 out of every 10, operated at a loss. Food costs are running more than 35% above pre-pandemic levels. Labor hasn't gone down, rent hasn't gone down. Customers' willingness to absorb more price increases is wearing thin. Founded in 1968, Red Lobster was the dominant casual seafood chain in the U.S. for over half a century. By 2023, it operated more than 700 locations and was generating around $2 billion in annual revenue. By every surface measure, it should have been printing money. It wasn't. In May 2023, then CEO Paul Kenny made the ultimate endless shrimp promotion. A fixed price for unlimited shrimp, permanent at $20 per person. It had been a limited time offer for 20 years. The bankruptcy filing later confirmed Kenny did this despite significant pushback from the rest of management. The math problem was immediate. Each shrimp refill cost the chain in raw inventory, labor, and side items. When a customer eats 2 servings, the restaurant makes money. When they eat 4 or 5, which happens regularly with all you can eat, the math flips. The restaurant loses money on every additional plate. Traffic grew 4% year over year during the promotion, but Thai Union, Red Lobster's parent company, posted a Q3 operating loss of $11.1 million from the chain. Q4 added another $12.5 million. Total losses for 2023, roughly $22 million. Then it got worse. Thai Union had also pressured Red Lobster to source nearly all its shrimp from Thai Union itself at higher prices than the previous supply chain. The owner and the supplier became the same company. Some locations ran out of shrimp entirely. In January 2024, Thai Union exited its investment, taking a $530 million impairment charge, nearly the entire $575 million it had put in. On May 19, Red Lobster filed for Chapter 11. Red Lobster didn't die because customers stopped coming. They were coming in record numbers during the endless shrimp era. Red Lobster died because the math underneath the dining room had been negative for years. Inside every restaurant, money is constantly being thrown into the trash. Food spoils. Shrimp from the Friday rush can't be safely served on Monday. Produce turns within days. Bread goes stale by morning. The owner paid the supplier in cash, and every hour without a sale is an hour the investment is decaying. FDA food code rules set strict time and temperature limits on how long proteins can be held. What the kitchen can't legally keep, it must discard. Industry studies estimate 4 to 10% of all food purchased is wasted before it ever reaches a paying customer. On a restaurant doing $1 million in annual sales, that's between $13,000 and $32,000 per year. Money paid for ingredients that never produced a single sale. This is why smart owners build menus around inventory flow. The same chicken appears in the salad, the sandwich, the wrap, and the soup of the day. That's engineered redundancy. A bone from a roasted chicken becomes stock for tomorrow's soup. Day-old bread becomes the breadcrumb topping on tonight's special. The restaurants that survive aren't the ones with the best recipes. They're the ones whose owners think like inventory managers, not just chefs. After ingredients, the second largest expense is the people, and labor is the hardest variable to get right. The median full-service restaurant spends about 36.5% of revenue on labor. The most profitable operators sit closer to 34, above 38, and the business is structurally underwater on staffing alone before food costs or rent. Demand is unpredictable. Labor isn't. Every shift has to be scheduled hours or days in advance. Friday night, 7:30, the dining room is full, but scheduling estimated lighter traffic, so there are only 2 servers on the floor. Orders pile up. Tables wait 15 minutes for water. Customers leave angry. Reviews appear online within 48 hours. One bad Friday can erase weeks of careful operations. Too many staff and profits disappear. Too few, and the business damages itself in front of paying customers. The pressure has gotten worse. California fast food workers won a $20 per hour minimum in April 2024. Pay floors across the major U.S. markets sit higher than 5 years ago. Every extra labor hour lands on the same prime cost line, already running 55 to 65% of revenue. This is the squeeze. Wages can only go in one direction. Prices can only go up so far before customers stop coming. For most U.S. restaurants in 2026, the gap is small enough that one bad month of scheduling can erase a year of careful work. The single most expensive decision a restaurant owner makes is rarely on the menu. It's the lease. Rent runs 5 to 10% of revenue. Once a lease is signed, that number is fixed for years. Sales can dip. Foot traffic can collapse. The rent check is still due on the 1st. Take 2 burger shops. Shop A sits on a busy downtown corner. $10,000 a month. To cover just the lease, the restaurant needs $120,000 in revenue every year. Shop B is on a quieter side street, $2,000 a month, but foot traffic is also a fraction of Shop A's. Visibility versus overhead. There's no obvious right answer. A standard restaurant lease runs 5 to 10 years, often with personal guarantees from the owner. It's a long-term fixed obligation signed against a variable revenue stream. If the neighborhood changes, if a major employer leaves, if a pandemic hits, The rent doesn't adjust. The lease outlives the conditions that justified it, and every month, that gap quietly compounds. Restaurants don't just hand you a list of food, they hand you a carefully designed sales document. The dollar sign trick is real. Cornell research from 2009 showed customers spend measurably more when prices are listed as plain numbers, 14 instead of $14. The dollar sign activates the mental association with spending money. Removing it reduces price sensitivity at the moment of ordering. Descriptive language works too. A study in the Journal of Sensory Studies found rich descriptive language increased sales by roughly 27%. Grandmother's slow braised pot roast sells better than pot roast. The descriptors don't change the food. They change the customer's expectation and the price they'll accept. What is clear from the research, items at the top of a category outsell items lower down. Items separated with boxes, color, or icons outsell items in plain rows. Items with photos outsell items without. The expensive entree on the menu is rarely where the money is made. The money is made on everything around it. A 12-ounce fountain soda costs the restaurant 15 to 30 cents to produce. It sells for $3 to $4. Gross margin, over 90%. The kitchen didn't cook it, it poured itself. Fresh juice is even more dramatic. A 12-ounce glass of fresh squeezed orange juice contains 75 cents to $1.50 of raw fruit. The same glass sells for $5 to $8, a gross margin between 80 and 90%. French fries run similar math. A pound of wholesale potatoes costs 50 cents to $1 and sells, cut and salted across multiple plates, for $5 to $7. Compare that to the entree. A 12-ounce ribeye might cost $14 to $18 in raw protein before the side dish, prep labor, cooking labor, plating, and share of overhead. The same steak sells for $38 to $45. After all costs, the actual profit on that single plate is often just a few dollars, sometimes less. This is why the entire service flow is engineered around upselling. Can I start you with something to drink? Asked within 60 seconds. Care for an appetizer? Save room for dessert? The server isn't improvising. These are trained, sequenced prompts. Every successful one adds $4 to $12 of nearly pure margin revenue to a check otherwise dominated by thin margin entree sales. The most recent existential threat to restaurant margins didn't come from rent or labor. It came from the phone in your pocket. When DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Grubhub became dominant in the early 2020s, they sold restaurants a simple promise. Plug into our app and reach millions of new customers. We do the marketing. We do the delivery. All you have to do is cook. The promise was real, so was the cost. DoorDash, which controls roughly 67% of the U.S. delivery market, charges 15% on its basic tier, 25% on Plus, and 30% on Premier. Uber Eats charges 15 to 27%. Grubhub charges 5 to 20. Those are the published numbers. The real numbers are worse. Once you add payment processing fees, marketing dollars for promoted placement, and smaller fees buried in the agreements, the effective cost frequently lands between 30 and 40% of the order total. Now go back to the math. A full-service restaurant at the industry median runs a net profit margin of 3 to 5%. When the delivery app takes 30 to 40% of revenue on every order, the restaurant isn't making a smaller profit on delivery orders. The restaurant is losing money on every delivery order placed through the app. This sounds like an exaggeration. It isn't. Operators have been showing customers on social media side-by-side receipts where a $50 order generates a net loss after the platform's cut. The packaging and the food cost have been subtracted. So how do restaurants survive? 3 answers. Many don't. They remove themselves from the platforms. Many raise prices on the app to subsidize the commission, which is why the same burger costs $14 on DoorDash and $11 at the counter. The more sophisticated operators have launched ghost kitchens, delivery-only operations with no dining room, no front-of-house staff, no Main Street rent. The bigger lesson, delivery apps didn't destroy restaurants. They revealed how thin the margins always were. A business at 5% net profit margins can't absorb a 30% third-party cost line without breaking. The apps didn't change the math. They exposed it. step back from the math for a moment. What we've walked through isn't really a story about restaurants. It's a story about thin margins meeting fixed costs in a world that doesn't negotiate. Food spoils, wages rise, leases signed for a decade, delivery apps take their cut. The 42% of U.S. restaurants that managed to be profitable in 2024 did it the same way operators always have, by understanding every line of the spreadsheet and respecting the math underneath. Red Lobster didn't die because customers stopped loving it. Customers were eating endless shrimp by the basket. Red Lobster died because somewhere in the spreadsheet, the cost of those baskets had quietly stopped working. What separates the survivors isn't luck. It isn't even great food. The survivors are operators who know their prime cost to the 0.5%, who treat a Tuesday afternoon staffing decision as seriously as a Friday night's menu, who know which item is the profit engine and which is the loss leader, who read the lease before they signed it. The dining room is theater. The spreadsheet is the business. The next time you sit down at a restaurant that's been around for 10 years, take a second look at the owner walking through the dining room shaking hands. They're running one of the hardest small businesses in the modern economy in an industry where most of their competitors didn't make it. If this changed how you think about the restaurant on your corner, hit subscribe so the next video lands in your feed. Like the video if it earned it. And tell me in the comments, what's the longest running independent restaurant in your neighborhood and how long has it been there? See you in the next one.